after you wedge your clay, you're gonna need to find a work area. So I set my clay and my tools at an empty place on a table. And here in the hand building room, there's plenty of these banding wheels. Just select any one of these. Some are not so good. I wouldn't recommend those, or this one even. But usually these ones that have two thick wheels on them, they spin really well. And because I'm only making small stuff, I'm just going to get a small banding wheel. And just set them in their workplace. So I divided that 10-pound ball of clay into 4 2.5-pound balls of clay. So here's 2.5 pounds, freshly wedged. And if I make a sphere out of this and put it right in the center of this wheel, I can just stick it down. And I'm kind of pressing with the heel of this palm into these fingers, and just I'm kind of changing the shape of it and sticking it to the wheel. So it's completely sealed down here along the bottom. It's not coming off of there unless I cut it off of there with my wire tool, which I'll do at the end of my working session. So another good thing to have available for yourself is just a little bit of water and a sponge. So if you could use your little tiny sponge that came in your kit, I just get a small bowl of water. There's very few little bowls around here. You might want to bring your own small container for your sponge and water. You might want to bring your own plastic to cover this up when you're done. A lot of items that we typically have here, they've gotten rid of. We don't want to be using bags over and over again by multiple different people. So please bring your own plastic to cover your work. Anyways, clay gets really dry, so I'm going to just try to keep my hands slightly damp while I'm working with it. And I'm just going to plunge my thumb straight down into the center of this. And I'm not going to go in there all at once, because my thumb's kind of crooked, and I need to make somewhat of a straight hole. So I just go down a little bit and rotate, and a little bit and rotate, and a little bit and rotate, until my thumb's down near the bottom. So you can see my thumb's that long, so it's almost down into the bottom. It's not quite to the bottom, but it's pretty close. I maybe have about this much room between my thumb and the wheel. So the clay is somewhere maybe about a 1/2 inch thick, I'm guessing. That was a good move, Tommy. But here, I'll just stick this needle down in there. So yeah, actually my floor is about 1 inch thick still. So I could go down a little bit deeper. So I'm going to end up trimming the bottom of this and carving some clay off the bottom. So I can leave it right around a 1/2 inch thick, and eventually I'm going to trim it down to be about a 1/4 inch thick. So another good way to measure this, since it's hard to get your finger in there, I could drop the butt end of this needle tool down inside, and once it hits the center of my floor, then I'll just grab the needle tool up here. And notice how my thumb is touching the stick, right? And then if I move this over here, you can see the distance between the bottom of this needle tool and the wheel. It's about the width of my finger. So the floor of my clay is about the width of my finger in thickness, which is a pretty good place to start. So you can see that, I'm turning this and I'm pinching it. And you can just continue to do that with one hand or the other. Notice it's just, I'm turning it like a 1/4 inch and pinching it a little bit. Turn it a 1/4 inch, pinching a little bit. And so it's just gradually changing the shape of this. You don't want to squeeze a lot and turn a lot. You want to pinch a little and turn a little. So now down in the base of this wall, there's kind of a thinner wall here and a thicker wall up here. So now I'm going to be using both hands to pinch. And I'm bringing my thumbs together on the inside of this wall, and I'm bringing my fingers together on the outside of the wall. And that's allowing me to lift this wall upward rather than pinch it and allow it to flare out into a bowl shape. I call it the squinch pinch because I'm squinching while I'm pinching. We need a laugh button and an applause. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. No, I was holding back a laugh, to be fair. Time to go ahead.
Ash was the only one who stuck around for the demo. So you can see that as I'm pinching, the clay is expanding, and as the clay expands, it's getting thinner and taller and all those other things. But what's also happening is the heat of my hand is warming the skin of the clay, and so the surface is getting dry at a faster rate than the core. So inside this wall, the clay is soft and cool, and so when I pinch it, it easily squeezes and stretches. And the stretching is causing cracks on the surface, which I think you're gonna just probably want to embrace those cracks because they can be a good thing, and you can work with them and just accept that that's the way this clay is. This is recycled clay. It's gonna crack much more readily than the store-bought clay. If you do get some clay from Alpha, those clays are going to be less prone to cracking. But if you buy the recycled clay and you start noticing that, notice I just squeezed most of the water out of the sponge, and I have a pretty dry sponge with a little bit of water in it, and I can smear that up here. And then I can heal some of those cracks just by using my fingers with a little bit of water. Notice the water did not run down the wall. There's not a big puddle inside. I just put it where I wanted it, carefully on the lip. And now I'm just squeezing the lip with my fingertips to heal all of those little micro fissures. And that way, if I want to keep pinching, then my lip's not going to completely crack apart and open up. So I can get back down in here and pinch some more. Or I can just simply accept the fact that my fingers are only this long and I may not be able to get back down in there to do much. Let's recognize, though, that there's a lot of thickness down here that I'm going to have to deal with. I have a pretty thin wall up here. Everything from about halfway up is about a 1/4 inch thick or less. Everything from about halfway down is greater than a 1/4 inch thick. So I'm going to have to trim and carve some of the thickness off of the wall out here. Because my trimming tools are like this and like this, these are very easy to use on the exterior. These are not easy to use on the interior. So what I want to do right now is finish the inside to the best of my ability, thinking about both shape and texture. So before I let this thing start to dry out, I can use stuff like these ribs. This rib's maybe not good right now because this is wet and this is metal, and wet clay sticks to metal unless I use a lot of water. So I'm going to set that aside. Now I have these two. This one's in your beginning level packet, and this one's something you can buy in addition to your beginning level packet. Make sure you pick up this Kemper RB4 wooden rib. This is great for plates and saucers. This is great for pots and cups and bowls, jars. There's so many more curves you can make with this one. So I'm going to take my Kemper RB4 wooden rib and get inside of this little pinch form. What I want you to notice is how lumpy and bumpy the inside of that is right now, and how it looks just as irregular as the outside of this. Knowing that eventually I'm going to carve this and shave it down and refine it, like I can leave this to be however it is. But now is the best time to get inside there, and you'll see how what looks kind of lumpy and bumpy right now can quickly become kind of smooth with just this one tool. Keeping your left hand out to support it and your whatever your dominant hand is on the inside, I can just start swiping these walls, and I'm moving the rib sort of into my hand, and I can do it
How much pressure?
from the lip down. The pressure is relevant to the softness of your clay and the angle of your rib. It's going to be a really light pressure if you're just right on your hand. It can be a heavy pressure if it's stiffer. I don't know how to communicate that with words. People ask me how much pressure, and I always have a smart ass remark on
No,
that.
I understand because there are other things.
My favorite response is like 37 psi. And everyone goes, "Oh, okay,"
I love that.
but nobody knows what that means.
That would be a lot of pressure,
Like,
actually.
and then the other way I've tried to show people is like I'll put their hand between my hand and my rib, and I do that, and then they go, "Oh, okay." But like you gotta maybe break through a wall and start over, and then you have to maybe like spend way too long smoothing something out to realize you're not doing enough. You gotta ruin some stuff. I say this all the time in my wheel class, like, be willing to fail. If you guys rip through a few of these, then you're gonna find a breaking point, and then you're gonna know that that was too much pressure. And then if you're too soft about it and it just takes you forever, then maybe you're not putting enough pressure on it. And that's something that just has to come through the hands. I can't tell you because your ears aren't going to communicate that. I can't say it in the number. I can't. Even showing you doesn't really give you the
It's like how much
understanding.
pressure you put on like when you're like carving on the wheel. Like it's, well, it depends.
Yeah, it's a learning process.
So which side of the rib are you using?
Which side of what?
Which side of the rib are you using?
The curved side, because I want the inside of my wall to be curved.
I was kind of wondering like which of the
The narrow or the broad?
yeah.
I guess the narrow end is up and the broad side is down. And really, the classical shape, I believe, is the egg. If we're thinking about shape and form and strength and volume, and
Eggs are strong.
eggs are strong, and so the inside of this form I'm noticing is already becoming very egg-like in its proportions and in its texture. And it's just a super strong form, visually and physically.
Yeah.
classic. It's so nice to know that I can edit these videos. You know? Like they don't have to actually sit and watch me turn this over and over and
Sure.
over again.
You might
But
wanna
anyway.
do like an unedited video and like a shorter video too, because like it might be good to see like it repeated, you know, for some people. I feel like I appreciate the fact that it's. I don't feel like most people would, but I feel like I would appreciate seeing all the little things.
So it's not perfect, but it's much smoother. The interior is more of a functional surface texture. The walls up here are still relatively thin. I mean, they're within the realm of acceptability. I've got less than 1/4 inch in my wall thickness up top. Down here, it's going to be much thicker. I've got closer to like 3/4 of an inch down there. Maybe even more than that down here. So I've got my work cut out for me to carve this thing. Now, carving it right now with this is going to be very sticky. So I have to let this stiffen up. And I'm going to let it go to a leather firmness before I start carving or drawing or painting or doing anything on this. So now I have to just set this aside and let it get firm. And one way to do that is to help yourself to these wear boards over here. There's some wear boards up here, plenty of small boards. There's wear boards over here under the sink in this cubby space. There's even wear boards in the throwing studio. We have them all over the place.
I think there's a lot more this year than there were last year.
So if I'm going to make more than one of these, I might get a board where I could fit 4 or 5 on here. We don't store work on these wheels. These wheels we put back up there. So I'm going to use my wire cutter, wrap it around my index finger, push down on the wheel with my thumbs, and just draw that wire underneath the form, cutting it as close to the wheel as you can. It usually leaves a little bit of clay down there, and you can just wipe that off with your wooden rib or your finger or something. So when you're all done with this, you want to put these away. But while you're here, you know, that took very little time. You might as well make a bunch of them. And that's why I showed you how to wedge a big piece of clay, 10 pounds or more even, and just cut that 10-pound block up into smaller portions. If you really want to challenge yourself, try even cutting your 2.5-pound ball in half. You can try using a 1.25-pound ball and see what you can do with that. Put this one back for later. Prepare at least 10 pounds of clay for yourself. If you have a couple hours to work, then you don't want to just work on one small piece of clay. You want to work on many small pieces of clay so you can make multiples. This one I'm just going to let it dry out while I work, but I'm going to have to cover that before I leave for the day. So here, let's see if I can make something as big as this out of half as much clay. It's just going to require a lot more pinching. again, I'm driving that thumb straight through the center. But I'm only going down just a tiny little bit, and then I'll turn it. Down ½ inch, quarter inch, turn it. Down quarter inch, turn. Down quarter inch, turn. And eventually, after about, I don't know, 6 or 8 rotations and many plunges and pinches, then you're getting down close to the bottom. Again, if I rest this needle tool across there, make sure this is somewhat level. So there's my floor. My floor is very thin right now. It's like paper thin. If you accidentally make your floor too thin, just grab some fresh clay. Make sure it's fresh clay. Don't make it a hard chunk of clay. And if it's fresh clay, you can just put a little bit of water on that and drop that ball right down in there and smash that into your floor. And now my floor is thick again. So there we go. My floor is about the width of my finger, just at the nail, so it's maybe 3/8 of an inch thick, which is great. That'll allow me to trim a foot. Like this one does not have a trimmed foot, but this one, it does. And you can do either way. There's going to be some fatigue in this too. If you haven't pinched much, your fingers might get tired. And there's different ways to do it. Right now I've put my fingers inside. I'm trying to get this wall to go inward and upward. So with my fingers on the inside instead of my thumbs, I'm kind of smearing inward and upward. Always reminds me of pie crust. I love baking pie crusts. Anybody like baking pie crusts here?
I love pie.
My grandma showed me how to make a pie crust. Most people are amazed at my pie crusts. This is just similar. If there's any bakers in this class, you guys might have a chance of making some cool stuff.
Just no.
Just might. Sounds like we've got drawers, painters, dancers, architects, historians, tattoo artists, lots of pet lovers, dog lovers. What else did we learn about today? Art educators.
How much of a lift do you want on these, or not at all?
I think the lip should be slightly thicker than the wall. Just barely thicker. Like this wall on this one is just a little bit thinner than the lip. The lip is just a tiny bit thicker than the wall. And so I think the answer to the question, Ash just asked, how thick do I want the lip? Well, that all depends on the form. How thick is your wall? And And the thickness of your wall will determine the thickness of your lip.
But yeah, that's actually exactly what I was asking, was should it be thicker or about the same? Or thinner, you know?
It should be a little bit thicker for durability purposes. And also to avoid making the classic mistake, I think, of making your lip too thin or way thinner than your wall. It's easy to make your lip thin. What's hard is to get this stuff thin down here.
Yeah.
So just try to work on this. And there's so many different ways you can do it. Just by smearing it with your finger or drawing up there with some tools. You can try all sorts of things right now about how to get that thickness out of there. But basically, it's really thin right in the center of this wall right now. And again, it's still kind of thick down there. These things may resemble like tree trunks.
I was going to say, like, it looks like a tree trunk to me.
But again, like, I'm gonna have to trim this clay off down here, and before I do that, I want to let it stiffen up slightly. I could smear some of this out and smooth that lip off and give it a little bit more of a refined edge. I always encourage finishing the inside. I mean, even if you haven't picked up this, you might want to finish the inside with the rib that they gave you in your tool packet. Although you should all go get that Kemper RB4 wooden rib. It's a game changer. Did it again. Here I just peeled off the clay from the outside. I just peeled off a little bit of clay. But look, I went right through. You can see the wheel. And like, rather than thinking that it's the end of the world or anything, I just peeled off a little bit of clay by smearing my finger along there. I have some wet, soft clay. I'm just gonna make a ball of it, get it soft. I probably should have made the ball before I put the water on
Exactly what you're not supposed to do for throwing.
it. Yeah, there's a lot more forgiveness with hand building, I think, because you're not relying on that mechanized wheel speed. Here we can make a few more just random adjustments. This isn't ideal. I mean, I wouldn't have preferred to make that hole, but there's ways you can overcome that. I was just trying to smooth it out so much that I pushed right through the floor. But clay is so forgiving. I mean, there's ways you can patch it and deal with it. So again, I'm just going to go right back down in there with this rib and hopefully not make a hole through my floor. Okay, so the inside has been smoothed out. It's not perfect, again, but it's something that I could pour a glaze over and have a functional surface. If you want to make it really smooth, you can go back in there with your fingertips. I almost don't want to tell you what not to do, because it always seems like people just do whatever you tell them not to do. But a lot of people are going to want to just put water all over these things and drown them. I wouldn't do that. You could, however, just take a damp sponge and go in there like one time and just moisten that wall if you wanted to, and then really smooth it out with just your fingertips. That doesn't mean keep drowning this thing with water and making it all sandy and slippery. So there, I've got a very similar form. It's much thinner than that one. The lips slightly thicker than the wall. The wall up here is thin. The wall down here is thick. I'm gonna end up using these tools to trim it next time I come to the studio. Again, the way you cut it off is just with your wire cutter. Make sure that wire is as close to the wheel as possible so you don't cut through the bottom. So there's a big cup and a little cup, and should I show you one more thing, or just leave it at that for now?
You have less than 10%.
Oh yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that for now. I'll show you how to add a coil next time.